The first thing that hit me was the drink. Cold, sweet, sticky down the side of my jaw and into the collar of my tunic, and the man who threw it was already turning to his camera before the cup had finished bouncing on the cobblestones. "Did you see that? Did you get that?" he shouted, grinning, walking backward across the forecourt with his phone held high. He wanted me to swing. He wanted me to roar, to break my line, to give him the 1 second of footage that would make me a monster and make him famous. I stood there with lemonade running off my chin, my rifle at my shoulder, my eyes forward, and I gave him nothing. What he did not know, what none of them knew that morning, was that the cameras he was counting on to lie for him were about to tell the truth instead. Let me take you back to where it started, because the drink was not the beginning. The setup had been arriving for 10 minutes before I felt the cold splash, and a guard learns to read a crowd the way a sailor reads weather. My name is Sergeant Eli Marsh, and at that time I had stood the forecourt post at the King's Court, the wide stone plaza inside the outer gates of the royal residence at Aldermere, for the better part of 9 years. 9 years of tourists, of selfies, of children waving, of the occasional fool who thinks the still man is a statue he can dare. I had been spat near, leaned into, shouted at, and once had a man do a full minute of jumping jacks 2 feet from my face to see if I would laugh. I never laughed. The stillness is not a trick. It is the whole job. The day they put the bearskin on your head, they tell you the same thing they have told every man for 200 years. You are not a person on that post. You are the post. So when the man in the pale linen jacket arrived that morning, I clocked him the way I clock everything, without moving my head, with the edge of my vision, with the part of a sentry's mind that never sleeps. He was perhaps 40, well-fed, expensive sunglasses pushed up into hair that had been arranged to look careless. He had a colleague with him, a younger woman with a proper shoulder-mounted camera, and a second man hanging back near the railing pretending to be a tourist, holding his phone low against his hip and aimed. I would later understand, directly at my boots and the cobblestones in front of them. 3 people, 2 cameras I could see and 1 I could not yet. That is not a family on holiday. That is a crew. And a crew that splits up and frames a still man from 3 angles is not there to film the palace. I want to be honest about what went through my mind, because that is the only thing I can really give you, the inside of the helmet, the view from behind the face that never changes. My first thought was not fear and it was not anger. It was a flat, professional weariness, the kind you feel when you see the storm coming and know you cannot leave the deck. I thought, here we go. I thought, whatever this man wants, the answer is that he does not get it. And underneath that, quieter, the thing they drill into you until it is bone. Do not give them the moment. Whatever they do, the only victory is the moment, and you simply do not hand it over. The man in linen, I never learned to think of him by a name until much later, so for most of that morning he was just the loud one in my head. Started gently. They always start gently. He stood a respectful 8 feet off and asked me questions in a bright, carrying voice, the kind pitched less at me than at the phones of the people gathering behind him. How long do you have to stand there, mate? Do they pay you by the hour? Do you ever just want to scream? The tourists laughed. That is allowed. Laughter at the still man is the oldest game at the gates, and I have made my peace with it. I kept my eyes on the middle distance, on the gilded spike of the far railing where I always fix them, and I let the questions break over me like rain on stone. Then he changed, not all at once but in steps, and each step was measured, and that is the detail I keyed on, the detail that told me this was not a drunk and not a clown. A drunk escalates because he has lost the thread. This man escalated because he had a script. He came in to 6 feet. He started narrating me to his camera as though I were an exhibit. Look at this. Look at the eyes. They train them to feel nothing. You think there's a man in there. I don't think there's a man in there. He snapped his fingers an inch from my nose. He flicked the brim of my bearskin's chin strap. Each time he glanced, just a flick of the eye, but I saw it back at the woman with the shoulder camera, checking that she had the frame. A man genuinely furious does not check his framing. A man building a product does. And I understood, standing there with my jaw set and my heart steady, exactly what product he was building. I had seen the others. We all had. Every guardsman who has worn the bearskin in the last few years has watched some 30-second clip go around the world. A soldier shoving a tourist, a soldier shouting, a soldier red-faced and human and finished. Sometimes the tourist deserved it. It never mattered whether they deserved it. The clip always started the instant the guard moved and never 1 second before, so the world only ever saw the swing and never the hour of provocation that earned it. That is the trick of the short clip. It begins at the convenient lie. And this man in linen had come to my forecourt to manufacture exactly that, to poke and prod and provoke until I gave him 1/2 second of motion, and then to publish that 1/2 second naked, stripped of everything that came before it, and let the world hang me with it. So I made a decision, and I made it cold, the way you are supposed to. I decided that no matter what he did short of an actual assault that endangered the public or the post, I would not move. Not a flinch, not a word, not a turn of the head. I would let him empty his whole bag of tricks into the still air and walk away with nothing but footage of himself being a fool to a man who would not play. Let his camera run all day. A camera pointed at patience for an hour films nothing but the cameraman's shame. That was the plan in my head when the cup of lemonade came over my shoulder and down my collar. He had escalated to the throw because the words had failed, and the throw is a clever piece of theater, cold liquid, a gasp from the crowd, the visceral insult of it. He threw it and spun to his colleague and crowed, "Did you get that?" And for one breath the whole forecourt held still to see what the soaked statue would do. The sweet stuff was crawling down my spine. My grip on the rifle did not change. My eyes did not leave the far railing. I let it run. I felt every tourist's phone lift like a field of little glass eyes, and I thought, with a calm that surprised even me, "Film away. Film all of it. You are going to wish you hadn't." What I did not yet know was that the loud one's whole plan had a flaw built into its bones, and that the flaw was about to walk into the forecourt wearing a maintenance vest, carrying a clipboard, on the most ordinary errand in the world. The lemonade was the turn. Before it, he had been working me. After it, when I still had not moved, something in him curdled. I have provoked enough men in training exercises to know the look. The moment a plan that should have worked does not, and the planner stops being clever and starts being desperate. He had come for a swing, and I had handed him a soaked, motionless man who stared through him as though he were weather. That is not a clip. Nobody clicks on a man getting rained on. He needed the violence, and the violence would not come, and I watched the calculation behind his sunglasses recompute toward something uglier. "You're not even human," he said, and now the bright carrying voice had gone thin and real. He stepped inside the 6 feet, inside the 4, close enough that I could smell the citrus on his own breath. Come on, do something. You think you're better than me. You think standing there like a tin soldier makes you better than me." He was performing for the camera still. The flick of the eye to the shoulder rig never stopped, but the anger underneath had become genuine. And a genuinely angry man is more dangerous than a calculating one because he stops measuring his steps. He put his face an inch from mine. I could see myself doubled in his sunglasses, a small red figure perfectly still. I kept my eyes on the railing past his ear. I breathed slow through my nose. I counted the way my first sergeant taught me a decade ago, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The discipline is not the absence of feeling. The discipline is the feeling fully present and the choice on top of it. Then he did the thing that he thought would surely break me, and it is the thing that ended him, though neither of us knew it yet. He reached up with one finger and he pushed the brim of my bearskin, hard, knocking it back off the line of my brow so it tipped on my head. A small thing. To a civilian, almost nothing. To a guardsman, it is a deliberate violation of the post, a hand laid on the uniform with intent, and there is not a man in the regiment who would not have understood a measured response to it. He knew that. That was the whole point. He shoved my cap and he stepped back and spread his arms wide and bellowed, "There it is. Now do something about it, soldier. Defend your little hat." And he was grinning again, openly now, because he was certain, absolutely certain, that no man alive could take that and stand. I took it and I stood. I will not pretend it was easy. Behind the still face my pulse was up, and there was a hot wire of something running from my chest to my fists, the old animal that wants to answer a hand laid on you. But I have spent more years than that man has been clever learning to let the animal run in a cage. I let it run. I felt it throw itself at the bars and I felt it tire, and I kept my rifle at my shoulder and my eyes forward and my crooked cap exactly where his finger had left it, because to reach up and fix it would have been emotion, and emotion was all he wanted, and he was going to get nothing. Not even the dignity of me straightening my own hat. Let it sit crooked. Let the photo show a soaked guard in a tilted bearskin staring at nothing, immovable. That photo does not sell. That photo makes the photographer look like a bully and the soldier look like a wall. Good. Let it be a wall. It was about then that the maintenance man came through the side arch. His name, I would learn, was Tomas Reyes, and he was a contractor. One of the dozens of ordinary working people who keep a palace running and whom the tourists never notice. He had a vest the color of a traffic cone, a clipboard and a tablet, and he had come into the forecourt to do the most boring task imaginable, to walk the line of the public-facing security cameras mounted along the inner wall and confirm, one by one, that each was recording and time-stamped, because there was a maintenance audit that week and someone had to tick the boxes. He was not police. He was not palace staff in the grand sense. He was a man with a job, and his job that morning happened to be standing under each camera with his tablet, watching its live feed to confirm it was capturing, which meant that at the moment the loud one shoved my cap, Tomas Reyes was looking directly at a screen showing the forecourt camera's continuous, time-stamped, unbroken view of the whole encounter, the 8 feet, the 6, the 4, the snapping fingers, the flick strap, the thrown drink, the shoved cap, all of it, from the very first bright question. And Tomas Reyes, being a decent man, did not like what he saw. He told me afterward that he had stopped under the 3rd camera and just watched the screen for a full minute, jaw tightening, because he had a brother in the service, and he knew exactly what it cost a man to stand still and take that. But he was a contractor. He had no standing to intervene, no authority to lay a hand on a member of the public, and he was wise enough to know that a maintenance vest charging across a forecourt would only become part of the clip the loud one wanted. So he did the smartest thing anyone did that whole morning. He kept his face neutral, he kept walking his line as though nothing were wrong, and quietly, methodically, he made sure that every camera on that wall, all 6 of them, overlapping, time-stamped, owned by the palace and admissible, was rolling and saving to the server. He did not need to film the loud one. The loud one had walked into a forecourt already ringed with honest eyes, and Tomas simply confirmed that every one of them was open. I knew none of this in the moment. From the post, I saw a man in an orange vest with a tablet, glanced him into the harmless staff column of my mind, and returned my attention to the threat in front of me. But that is the bone of the whole thing, and I think about it still. The loud one had built his entire scheme on the assumption that the only cameras that mattered were his own, the ones he controlled, the ones he could cut and trim and start at the convenient lie. He had forgotten or never considered that a royal forecourt is one of the most filmed acres of ground on earth, 40 tourists with phones, 6 palace cameras on the wall, the woman's shoulder rig, the hidden phone at the hip by the railing. And now a maintenance contractor with a tablet showing him every angle at once. He thought he was the only one writing the record. In truth, he had stepped onto a stage wired with more honest witnesses than any liar could ever survive. He shoved my cap a second time, harder. And this time he made his fatal mistake. He said, loudly to his camera, the exact sentence that would later play in slow motion on every screen that mattered. "Tell you what," he announced, turning so the shoulder rig caught his profile, I'm gonna keep going till he cracks. Everybody does. Give it 5 minutes. We'll get the shot and we'll cut all this." He waved a hand at the long approach at his own 10 minutes of taunting and just run the bit where he loses it. Trust me. By tonight this guy's the most hated man in the country, and we're trending. He said it the way a man says something to a colleague he trusts, not understanding that the woman's camera was recording her audio too, that the hidden phone at the railing was running uncut, that Tomas Reyes 30 feet away had a tablet capturing the same forecourt feed with the same timestamp. And that, this is the part that still makes me shake my head, his own woman with the shoulder rig had hit record the moment they arrived and never stopped. Because she was new and nervous and had been told to capture everything and sort it later. He had just narrated the entire fraud, on the record, in 4 different recordings simultaneously, in the belief that only the trimmed version would ever exist. He had confessed to the crime while committing it, and he had done it to a lens. I did not hear most of that sentence clearly. He had his back half to me, but I heard the shape of it, and I felt the crowd hear it. There is a sound a crowd makes when it stops being entertained and starts being uneasy, a kind of murmur with the laughter drained out, and I heard that sound move through the tourists behind him. A few of them lowered their phones. One older gentleman near the front said, not loudly but clearly, "That's enough now, that's not right." And I held my eyes forward, but I marked him, because a crowd that turns is a different animal from a crowd that gawks, and this one was turning. The loud one felt it too, and instead of pulling back, he panicked into more. He came at me a 3rd time. He grabbed the front of my tunic, actual fistfuls of 200-year-old scarlet wool, and he yanked, trying to physically jostle a reaction out of me. And now we were past theater and into assault. A hand closed on the uniform with force. And here is where the discipline becomes not just patience but judgment, because there is a line, and the line is not my pride, and it is not my hat, and it is not even the insult. The line is the post. The moment a man's hands on me became a question of whether he might go for my rifle, or push past me toward the inner gate, or endanger the public crowding close behind him, my duty changed from enduring to acting. And acting, for a guardsman, is a narrow, drilled, proportionate thing. So I acted once exactly as I was trained and not 1 degree more. I did not strike him. I did not shout. In a single controlled movement, I brought my rifle down across my body to a guard position, took 1 hard step that put my boot and my full braced weight between him and the gate, and in the same beat I called out the command, the real one, the loud parade ground command that every guardsman is taught precisely for the moment a still post must suddenly become a moving wall. Stand back from the guard. It cracked across the forecourt like a rifle shot itself, the first sound I had made in 11 minutes, and the contrast of it, the statue suddenly a voice of pure authority, did more than any shove of mine could have. His fists came off my tunic as though it had turned hot. He staggered back 2 steps, and the relief flooding his face lasted exactly half a second, until he realized that what he had just gotten on camera was not a guard losing his temper. It was a guard performing his duty flawlessly, controlled and lawful and proportionate, in response to a man assaulting him, and his own voice, on his own recording, explaining 1 minute earlier that he intended to provoke exactly this and cut away everything that justified it. That is the moment the lie filmed itself false. The 2 regimental colleagues who share the forecourt watch with me were already converging. They had read the escalation the same instant I had, the way you learn to read a brother's post, and within seconds the loud one was hemmed by Scarlet and being walked, firmly and without drama, toward the side arch where 2 of the palace's uniformed protection officers had appeared. He went from crowing to spluttering in the space of 10 steps. You all saw that. He attacked me. He came at me with the gun. He spun, looking for his crew, looking for his cameras, looking for the version of events he had walked in certain he would author. Tell them. You got it, you got him losing it, show them. And his own colleague, the nervous young woman with the shoulder rig, stood frozen with the camera still running and said the truest thing said all morning. She said, I got everything. Not the half, everything. The 8 feet and the 6 and the 4. The fingers, the strap, the lemonade, the 2 shoves, the grab. And his voice, bright and certain, telling her to cut it all and run only the bit where the soldier cracked. She had it. She had walked in to make a star of him, and she had filmed his ruin frame by frame with the lens steady, because that was the one instruction he had given her that she had actually followed. Capture everything. The protection officers took the loud one through the arch. The crowd did not cheer. That is not what a turned crowd does. But the older gentleman who had spoken began to clap, slow and deliberate, and a few others joined. And it was not a celebration so much as a verdict, the sound of ordinary decent people who had watched a man try to manufacture a monster and had instead watched a soldier refuse to be one. I straightened. I reached up finally and set my bearskin true on my brow, and that small motion, the still man fixing his own crooked hat once the threat was past, got its own murmur, almost a laugh, the good kind. Then I shouldered my rifle, fixed my eyes on the gilded spike of the far railing, and became the post again. I want to tell you that I felt vindicated standing there. I did not yet. Standing the rest of that watch with lemonade dried sticky in my collar and 40 strangers' phones still half raised, all I felt was tired and watchful and faintly sick, because in that moment I did not know what would happen to the footage. I knew he had confessed. I knew there were honest cameras, but I had seen too many true things drown under a well-funded lie to trust that the truth would simply float on its own. The loud one was a known name with a large platform and a habit, I would learn, of winning these things. The maintenance contractor was a stranger I had glanced past. The young camerawoman owed her career to the man being walked through the arch. And the half-second clip, the guard's rifle coming down, the shouted command, his fists flying off the tunic, was, taken alone, exactly the monstrous-looking image the loud one had come to manufacture. For the first hours of that afternoon, that half-second clip was winning. It went up before I had even come off post. The loud one walked out through the arch and released without charge while the officers took statements, did the only thing his kind knows how to do when a plan fails. He ran ahead of it. By the time I reached the guardroom and peeled the sticky collar off my neck, his trimmed clip was already climbing, 11 seconds beginning at the convenient lie the instant my rifle came down. No fingers, no strap, no lemonade, no grab, no confession. Just a soaked man with a rifle suddenly looming and roaring at a tourist who flinched back in apparent terror. Over a caption the loud one had written himself, "RoyalGuard attacks unarmed man over a joke." It was a masterpiece of the form. It made me a thug and him a victim, and it began precisely one heartbeat after the only second that could be made to look that way. My sergeant, a granite slab of a man named Whitlock who had stood these gates longer than I had been alive, watched it on a phone in the guardroom with his jaw working. He had seen the whole thing on the wall feed already. He knew the truth to the second. But he also knew the arithmetic of these things, and he said it plainly, because Whitlock never softened anything. Truth's slower than a lie, son. Always has been. That clip'll have 1,000,000 eyes on it by supper, and the truth'll still be putting its boots on. He was right. By the time I changed out of the soaked tunic, the 11 seconds had been shared 100,000 times. Strangers who had never stood a post in their lives were writing that I should be discharged, that the regiment was a brutal anachronism, that I had assaulted a man for a harmless prank. A few outlets picked it up wholesale, ran the loud one's caption as fact, and put my crooked-hatted face on their screens beside the word disgrace. He did an interview that same evening, hoarse and brave, dabbing at a face that had not a mark on it, describing how he had feared for his life when the soldier snapped. And here is the thing I have come to understand about that long, ugly afternoon. I could not fix it, and the trying would have made it worse. A guardsman cannot go on the internet and plead his case. The post does not explain itself. The instinct, the human animal in me, wanted to grab a camera and shout the 10 minutes he had cut, to drag the lemonade and the shoves and the confession into the light by force. But that is exactly the swing he had wanted on the forecourt, only delayed, the guard breaking his discipline, this time in front of a microphone, looking rattled and defensive and guilty. Whitlock put a hand on my shoulder, the only time in 9 years he ever did, and he said, "You held on the stone, hold here. The cameras did their job. Now let the men whose job it is do theirs, and you keep your mouth a wall the same as you kept your hands one." So I did. It was harder than the forecourt. The forecourt lasted 11 minutes. This lasted into the night. But the loud one had made one error he could not run ahead of, and that error was Tomas Reyes. The maintenance contractor went home that evening, I am told, and could not eat his supper. He had watched the 11-second clip on his own phone. His daughter had shown it to him, indignant, not knowing her father had stood 30 feet from the real thing, and he had sat at his kitchen table with the lie glowing in his hand, and the truth still burning in his memory, and he had made a quiet working man's decision. He still had his audit notes. He had timestamps. He had, on his own tablet, the clips he had pulled that very morning to confirm each camera was recording. The full, continuous, unedited forecourt feed from 3 overlapping angles. The 8 feet and the 6 and the 4 and every shove and the grab and the lawful command. All of it, beginning long before the convenient lie. He was not a brave man by temperament, he told me later. He just could not stand a thing being false when he held the true version in his pocket. So that night Tomas Reyes wrote a calm, careful email to the Palace's standards office, attached the unedited footage and his time-stamped audit log, and added one line. I was there confirming the cameras. This is what actually happened from the beginning. The clip going around starts in the wrong place. The cameras the loud one was counting on to lie for him had been watched, and saved, and sent on, by an honest man with a clipboard. The lie had filmed itself false, and now someone was holding up the negative. It did not move overnight. Truth still had its boots half-laced. But by the next morning the Palace Standards office had the full feed, the protection officer's statements, and, crucially, the young camerawoman who had not slept either. Her name was Priya Anand, and she was 24 and 3 months into the job, and she had spent the night with the unedited file on her laptop and her stomach in a knot, because she had the whole thing too. Her own shoulder rig had captured the loud one's voice, bright and unmistakable, instructing her to cut the 10 minutes of provocation and run only the crack. She knew that if she stayed quiet, the lie would hold and her career would be safe, and an innocent man would be broken for doing his duty. And she knew that if she spoke, she would burn the bridge to the man who had hired her and maybe the bridge to the whole trade. She chose. She sent the full file, including his confession, to the same standards office, and then, before anyone could spin it, she posted 30 seconds of it herself, plainly with no caption but the timestamp, the loud one's own voice, saying, "We'll cut all this and just run the bit where he loses it. By tonight this guy's the most hated man in the country and we're trending." That 30 seconds was the hinge of the whole affair, and it moved faster than his lie had. Because there is one thing the public hates more than a guard who supposedly snapped, and that is being played for a fool. The same crowd that had shared the 11 seconds in outrage now shared the 30 in fury, and the fury had a different target. People do not forgive being lied to on purpose. They watched the man who had cast himself as a trembling victim explain, in his own bright, confident voice, that the whole thing was a manufactured trap, and that the trembling was theater to be cut around. They watched, and then someone laid the 11-second clip beside the full 11-minute feed, side by side, and the contrast was annihilating. On one side, a victim. On the other, the same man pushing, flicking, throwing, shoving, grabbing, narrating his own fraud, against a soldier who stood like a wall through all of it and moved exactly once lawfully, when hands closed on him with force. By that afternoon, almost exactly 24 hours after the lemonade hit my collar, the question had completely inverted. It was no longer should the guard be discharged. It was, who is this man, and how many times has he done this before? And that, it turned out, was a very dangerous question for the loud one because the answer was many. Once the full feed was out and his own confession was attached to his name, the people he had done it to before stopped being afraid. A street performer in another city who had been edited into a violent meltdown. A bus driver who had supposedly screamed at a passenger, but had in fact been baited for 20 minutes off camera. A shop clerk, a parking warden, a young constable, a whole quiet gallery of ordinary working people who had been made monsters for 11 seconds each so that one man could trend. They had all suffered alone, each one certain the lie was theirs alone to carry. Now they came forward together, because the full forecourt feed had shown the country exactly how the trick was built, and once you have seen the trick built you can never unsee it in the others. His entire body of work, it turned out, was the same 11 seconds over and over, each one beginning at a carefully chosen lie. The platform that had paid him dropped him within the week. The outlets that had run his caption as fact issued corrections, some graceful, most grudging, and ran the side-by-side instead. The interview where he had dabbed at his unmarked face and described fearing for his life was now played only as evidence of how completely he had performed it. He was not arrested for the forecourt. The protection officers had walked him out without charge, and I never wanted him jailed. That was never the point. The consequence that ended him was cleaner and more fitting than any cell. He had built his whole self on the power to author the record, to decide where the clip began and what the world was allowed to see, and the forecourt had taken that one power away from him in front of everyone. A man whose only weapon is the convenient cut cannot survive the uncut truth. He went quiet. He took his accounts down. The most filmed acre in the country had filmed him true, and there is no coming back from being seen. I learned most of this secondhand because I was back on post within 2 days. The same forecourt, the same gilded spike on the far railing, the same flat morning light on the cobblestones where the cup had bounced. That is the part civilians find strange when I tell it, that the great vindication of my life happened mostly while I was standing perfectly still, saying nothing, doing the boring duty I had done the day the lemonade hit me. The cameras and the contractor and the young camerawoman and the turned crowd had done the work. My only job, the only job I have ever had on that stone, was to not become the thing he needed me to be, and I hadn't. That was the whole of my contribution to my own rescue. 11 minutes of not moving, and one lawful step when the line was finally crossed. A small thing happened a few weeks later that meant more to me than all the corrections and the dropped contracts, and it is where I will leave you. Tomas Reyes, the maintenance contractor, came back through the forecourt on his ordinary rounds, clipboard and orange vest and tablet, walking the camera line the same as the morning it all turned. He did not know I knew his name yet. He stopped under the third camera, the one whose feed had held the truth, and he ticked his box, and as he passed my post he slowed just slightly and gave me the smallest nod, not a fan's nod, not a gawker's, but the plain acknowledgement of one working man to another who has done his job under pressure and not folded. I could not nod back. I was on post. The post does not nod. But I held his eye for the half second it takes to say everything that matters between two men who understand duty, and then we both went back to our work, his clipboard and my rifle, two unremarkable men keeping unremarkable faith with a thing larger than either of us. He never asked for thanks. Priya Anna never asked for thanks either. She lost the easy version of her career and built a harder, better one telling true stories, and the last I heard she had never once regretted the file she sent. Decent people, it turns out, are everywhere. They are just usually quiet and usually overlooked, and usually standing 30 feet away with a clipboard while the loud man performs at the center of the frame. People ask me now, when they recognize the story, whether I was afraid that day, afraid the lie would win, afraid I would be the one discharged in disgrace for a crime I never committed. And I tell them the truth, which is yes, for one long afternoon I was. The lie had the early lead and the louder voice and the better headline, and there were hours when I genuinely believed it might bury me. But I have thought about it a great deal since, standing on that quiet stone with my eyes on the far railing, and I have come to believe something I did not fully understand on the morning the cup came over my shoulder. A lie is fast, and a lie is loud, but a lie is also fragile in a way the truth never is, because a lie can only survive in the dark it cuts around. It lives entirely in what it leaves out. The truth has nothing to leave out. The truth can stand in the open under 40 phones and 6 cameras and a contractor's tablet and a young woman's conscience, and the more of it you film, the stronger it gets. That is why the discipline works. That is why the still man wins. He is not winning by power. He is simply refusing to give the lie the 1 second of darkness it needs, and standing in the open until the cameras the liar trusted turn honest in his hand. The loud one came to my forecourt to manufacture a monster, and he had every tool he thought he needed: the script, the crew, the cut, the caption, the platform, the practiced hour of provocation that had broken better men than me. The one thing he could not bring was a forecourt without honest eyes, and there is no such place, not really, not anymore, and maybe there never was. He thought the cameras belonged to him. They never do. They belong to whatever is actually true, and that morning what was actually true was a soaked soldier in a crooked hat who would not move. And so the cameras filmed that, and the lie filmed itself false, and a man who lived by the convenient cut was finally, fully, mercilessly seen. I am still on the post. The lemonade washed out of the tunic in the end. The wool is 200 years old and has survived worse than one rude man's drink. The crooked hat sits true again. The far railing's gilded spike catches the morning the same as it always has. And when a new crew arrives now, and they still do, they always will, and I read the weather of them coming, the 3 figures splitting up, the cameras angling, the bright carrying voice winding up to its first gentle question, I feel the old flat professional weariness, and underneath it something steadier than I used to have. Because I know the secret now. I know what every liar with a lens has never quite understood and never will. He can cut the clip wherever he likes. He cannot cut the forecourt. And the man who simply will not move, who holds the open ground and gives the dark its nothing, has already won before the first drink is ever thrown. So I keep my eyes forward and I let it come and I stand. That is the whole of it. That has always been the whole of it. You hold the stone and you let the truth do the rest.